The rain had already turned the highway into a silver blur by the time I saw the flashing hazard lights on the side of the road. I almost kept driving. After all, I had my own problems, my own disappointments, and another lonely evening waiting for me at home. But something inside me refused to ignore the stranded car. I pulled over without realizing that the simple decision to help a complete stranger would become the moment that divided my life into two parts, everything before that rainy evening, and everything after it. Before we continue, if you believe kindness still exists and that everyone deserves a second chance, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, share this story with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to Dad's Second Chance for more heartfelt stories that remind us how one small act can change everything. At 42 years old, I wasn't the man I had imagined becoming. My marriage had ended 3 years earlier, leaving me with shared custody of my 10-year-old daughter, Emma. She was my entire world, but seeing her only every other week left an emptiness that echoed through my small apartment. My career as a mechanic kept food on the table, but every evening felt the same. Work, dinner alone, old television shows, and wondering where life had quietly slipped away. I had stopped expecting surprises. I believed the best chapters of my life had already been written. That rainy Tuesday had been especially exhausting. The repair shop had been overflowing with customers trying to prepare their vehicles before another storm rolled in. My back hurt, my hands were stained with grease despite repeated washing, and all I wanted was to get home. Then I noticed the white SUV sitting helplessly on the shoulder with its hood raised. Cars sped past, spraying water across the pavement, while one lone figure stood beside it, soaked despite holding a broken umbrella. She looked to be in her late 30s, wearing a navy blue coat that was quickly becoming drenched. Her dark hair clung to her face as she stared hopelessly into the engine compartment, clearly unsure what to do. I hesitated for only a second before grabbing my flashlight and walking through the rain. The battery terminal had loosened after hitting a deep pothole. It wasn't a major repair, but it wasn't something someone without tools could easily fix. Within 15 minutes, I had tightened the connection, checked the wiring, and asked her to try starting the engine again. The SUV roared back to life immediately. The relief on her face wasn't just relief. It looked like someone who had been carrying far more than a broken car. She smiled with tired eyes that seemed to have forgotten how to smile for a very long time. She introduced herself as Sarah, a widowed mother raising her 8-year-old son, Noah. She had been driving back from the hospital after visiting her father, who was recovering from heart surgery. Her phone battery had died, and every passing minute had made her fear being stranded after dark. She offered to pay me, but I refused. It didn't feel right accepting money for something so simple. She thanked me several times before driving away, and I honestly believed that would be the last time I ever saw her. Life, however, had different plans. 2 weeks later, Emma begged me to take her to the community fall festival at the local park. It was one of those small-town events with food trucks, handmade crafts, music, and games for children. While Emma was trying to win a stuffed bear at one of the booths, I heard a familiar laugh behind me. It was Sarah. Standing beside her was a young boy with bright eyes and an infectious grin. Noah was proudly showing off a painted pumpkin he had decorated. Sarah recognized me instantly, and the surprise on her face quickly became genuine happiness. She insisted that I join them for coffee while the kids explored the festival together. For the first time in years, conversation came naturally. There was no pretending to be someone I wasn't. She understood loss in ways few people could. Her husband had passed away unexpectedly 5 years earlier from a sudden illness, leaving her to raise Noah alone. She admitted there were mornings when simply getting out of bed felt like climbing a mountain. I quietly admitted that after my divorce, I had convinced myself I wasn't meant to be truly happy again. Neither of us realized that our children had already become friends while we were talking. From that day forward, our paths crossed more often than either of us expected. Sometimes it was at the grocery store. Other times at Emma's soccer games or Noah's school events. Eventually, we began planning those meetings instead of calling them coincidences. The hardest part wasn't falling in love. The hardest part was believing we deserved it. Both of us carried invisible scars that made us cautious. Every happy moment came with fear that it would disappear. Every plan for the future felt dangerous because life had already taught us how quickly everything could change. Emma noticed before anyone else. One evening she quietly asked why I smiled more whenever Sarah called. Children often see truths adults try to hide. I laughed, but she simply hugged me and whispered that she hadn't seen me this happy since before the divorce. Those words stayed with me. Months passed, and our little family slowly blended together. Weekend picnics turned into movie nights. Birthday parties became shared celebrations. Noah looked up to me, often asking for help fixing his bicycle or building small science projects. Emma adored having someone her own age to laugh with. For the first time in years, our homes no longer felt empty. But happiness is rarely simple. One winter afternoon, Sarah received devastating news. Her father's health had suddenly worsened, and doctors believed he had very little time left. She was overwhelmed with hospital visits, work responsibilities, and caring for Noah. I watched her trying to stay strong while quietly falling apart inside. Without thinking twice, I began helping however I could. I cooked dinners for the kids, picked Noah up from school, fixed things around her house, and simply sat beside her during long hospital evenings when words weren't necessary. Her father passed away peacefully just before Christmas. At the funeral, Sarah stood surrounded by people, yet somehow looked completely alone. When she reached for my hand, it wasn't because I had all the answers. It was because grief becomes easier when someone chooses to carry part of the weight with you. That moment changed everything between us. Several months later, on another rainy evening strangely similar to the one where we first met, I drove us back to the same stretch of highway. The weather wasn't as violent, but the rain still tapped gently against the windshield. We stood beside the roadside where her SUV had once broken down. I smiled as I reminded her that a loose battery cable had somehow rewired both of our lives. With shaking hands, I asked her if she would spend the rest of her life building new memories with me and our children. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, tears filled her eyes before she nodded. Sometimes the happiest answers don't need words. Today our home is noisy, imperfect, and wonderfully alive. Emma and Noah argue over board games, race through the backyard, and constantly remind us that families aren't always born the traditional way. Sometimes they're built through unexpected moments of compassion. Whenever people ask how Sarah and I met, they expect some romantic story from a restaurant or a vacation. Instead, I tell them the truth. Love found us on the shoulder of a rainy highway because one person decided not to drive past someone who needed help. If this story has touched your heart so far, please take a moment to like this video, leave a heartfelt comment, share it with someone who still believes in hope, and subscribe to Dad's Second Chance. Your support allows us to continue sharing stories that remind the world kindness is never wasted. Special request, before this story ends, please comment with the words, "Kindness changes lives," if you believe even the smallest act of compassion can create a future none of us could ever imagine. Looking back now, I often think about how close I came to driving past those flashing hazard lights. I would have gone home believing it was just another ordinary evening. Sarah would have found another solution eventually. Our children would have grown up never knowing each other. For lonely lives would have continued on separate roads. But life has a remarkable way of rewarding the moments when we choose compassion over convenience. Sometimes changing someone else's day ends up changing your entire future. And sometimes, your greatest blessing isn't something you spend years searching for. Sometimes it's simply waiting on the side of the road, hoping that one kind stranger decides to stop.